Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
No. Negative. I do not understand. Why is this spot not doable for pickup? I'm good to go. I say again, I'm good to go. Now.
Burnett! 06. You're a combat naval aviator. Start acting like one. You've been shot down. Life is tough. I am very sorry. Now you pull yourself together. You do whatever it takes. Create some angles between you and your pursuers. Use your training. Use your head. Evade and survive, and we will bring you home. Do you understand? We will bring you home. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 180th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell your nearest naval aviator about Backlook Cinema, the podcast, and be sure to thank them for their service. So this movie is going to be a little bit different, and part of it's because I chose it on a whim. Just a few episodes ago, I did a Gene Hackman movie with Denzel Washington, Crimson Tide, and as I was browsing, I saw there was another Gene Hackman military movie, and I was like, oh, I want to watch that one, and I didn't really check the information. I tried to stay within between the 1970s and 1990s, and sometimes I go a little bit out of that purview, and I did so with this one. And the movie that we're going to talk about is Behind Enemy Lines, and that came out in 2001. And every once in a while, I will dip into the 2000s because, you know, that I also feel the nostalgia from the movies that came out in between 2000 and 2010, and I might start dipping more into those movies because as I scroll and look for movies to talk about, I'm like, oh, I remember that movie. I want to talk about it, but it's in 2005 or 2008. But now it's like, we're so far away. It's like we're 20 years out from like 2005, right? So why not dip into some of those movies as well? I'm sure a lot of people listening have strong nostalgia for movies that came out in the early 2000s. So perhaps I should dip into that a little bit more. And the culture is still relatively the same. The culture of movies is, and the filmmaking is, and the types of movies that you can expect in the early 2000s. It's very similar to what happens in the late 90s. So I think I'll look into that more. But as it is right now, we're going to take a look at Behind Enemy Lines in the opening credits. Lieutenant Chris Longhorn Burnett is disillusioned with his role as a naval aviator. When he signed up for military service, he had aspirations of punching Nazis in the face, but instead he likens his duties to being a beat cop in a neighborhood that nobody cares about. Feeling as though his role is routine and useless, he's ready to resign his commission after 7 years of service. In what was supposed to be one of his last missions, serving as an aviator on the FA-18F Super Hornet fighter jet, he and his pilot are shot down over restricted airspace. Burnett finds himself in enemy territory, forced to run over a dozen miles and relentlessly pursued by the Serb Volunteer Guard and a particularly persistent mercenary. Can Burnett use all of his grit and training to avoid the opposition and reach the rendezvous point for certain rescue? Behind Enemy Lines was released November 30th, 2001, produced by 20th Century Fox and Davis Entertainment. It grossed over $58 million in the U.S. and Canada and over $91 million worldwide on a reported budget of $55 million. So that is not as good as I thought it was going to be. I remember when I first saw this movie, I thought it was a hit. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I saw this in movie theaters. With the unusual casting of Owen Wilson as basically an action hero, I had not expected this movie to basically bomb. It's basically a bomb. If you adjust it for inflation, if this movie came out today, it would have grossed over $104 million in the US and Canada. The international gross, the worldwide gross, would have been $164 million, and the budget would have been $99 million. If you understand how accounting works, and you're supposed to double the budget in order to, because they don't count the marketing budget as part of the filming budget. So this movie, in order to just break even, should have made $200 million, and it decidedly did not. And I am surprised, because I really had a fun time with this movie. I had a fun time with the just like the unique way that the film was edited and shot. So I guess that happens sometimes. This movie was starring Gene Hackman as Rear Admiral Leslie McMahon Riegert. You may have also seen him in Crimson Tide that I just mentioned, and we did that in episode 175. No Way Out, The Poseidon Adventure, and a lot of people remember and admire him from the movie Hoosiers. Owen Wilson plays Lieutenant Chris Longhorn Burnett, Longhorn being his call sign for his jet. You may have seen him in The World Tenenbaums with Gene Hackman. He's also been in Bottle Rocket, one of my favorite movies, Wedding Crashers, or you've probably seen him in Meet the Parents. Gabriel Match plays Lieutenant Jeremy Smoke Stackhouse. You may have seen him in The Good Shepherd, A Love Song for Bobby Long, or The Spirit, unfortunately. Those are all interesting movies, maybe movies that you may not have heard of, but the thing that most people remember him from is the smash hit TV show Suits. Charles Malik Whitfield plays Captain Glenn Rodway. He's been in Notorious, Fresh, and Hub City. Renowned actor Joaquin de Almeida plays Admiral Juan Miguel Piquet. You may have also seen him in Fast Five, Desperado, Clear and Present Danger, or pretty much any movie that has a European element to it. David Keith, not to be confused with Keith David, plays Master Chief Tom O'Malley. You may have seen him in An Officer and a Gentleman that we covered way back in episode 117. He's also been in Daredevil from 2003 and The Indian in the Cupboard. Oleg Krumpa plays General Miroslav Lokar. You may have seen him in Burn After Reading, Hidden Figures, or The Italian Job. Finally, Vladimir Mashkov plays Sasha the Tracker. You may have seen him in Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, Daddy, or 3 Seconds. And his face, when I saw it, was very familiar to me. It's like, I know this dude. I don't understand why this dude is so familiar, because most of his movies are Eastern European, probably Russian or out of that region. And so he's done a lot of movies, but there are a lot of European movies or Russian movies. So it's not like I've seen him in a lot of movies, but his face is super familiar and I couldn't figure out why. And later on in the trivia, I will point out why you may know that face. This movie is directed by John Moore. You may have seen his other movies, including Max Payne, The Omen from 2006, Flight of the Phoenix, A Good Day to Die Hard, or IT. Now, this is not a great pedigree. This is not a great run of film. I'm not sure about The Omen. That's not a movie that I have seen or would ever see. Flight of the Phoenix was okay. I think I kind of like that, but I didn't like any of the, well, I didn't see IT, so I couldn't mention that one. I didn't like, any of the other movies. That's particularly Max Payne or A Good Day to Die Hard. They kind of fell flat and very disappointing. This movie was written by John Thomas, and David Veloz, or I think I'm saying that right. So Jim and John Thomas are a brother writing team, And together they've written Predator, Wild Wild West, which I don't blame them for how that movie turned out, in spite of them having the writer's credit on that one. And I'm directly referencing the giant spider. I feel like there was a lot good going in that movie. They had a lot of great dialogue, but I think that the giant spider ruins it. Also, they wrote Executive Decision and Mission to Mars, which I do blame them for. That was a horrible movie, and everybody that's involved in that project, I blame. Villos wrote Natural Born Killers and Permanent Midnight. He does not have a whole lot of credits. At least he doesn't have a whole lot of writing credits. The movie is by Don Davis. He's also written music for the Matrix trilogy, Ballistic, X vs. Severs, which I know people hate, but I love that movie, and I couldn't tell you why. I watched the movie, I played the video game, I had a ball with that. You may have also heard his music in Antitrust, Bound, and The House on Haunted Hill from 1999. So that's it for the opening credits. Please check out my shop at backlinkcinema.com/shop. And still working on Bazaar de Alonso. I was supposed to be doing a movie review with the folks at Movie Lovers Unite. And that movie is The Warriors. I finally watched Warriors for the first time. And I can't wait to talk about it with John D. Gabriel from Movie Lovers Unite. However, we had to push that back. So hopefully we'll get that recorded at the end of this month. So now let's go over and talk about our favorite parts. So of course I like to go over the themes that I've been able to gin up for the movies that I watch. And this is basically a movie about a guy trying to evade capture. But the overall feeling, well, the main character, his overall feeling is that he feels like his life has become dull and routine. Like he joined the Navy because he felt like he was going to be fighting for the United States, and instead it feels like he's on like just routine patrol, and he's kind of over it. And I think it's a theme of having he's kind of young for a midlife crisis, but that's essentially what he's suffering from. He's suffering from a midlife crisis. The background theme being his disillusion, or how his life, it doesn't have the meaning that he wanted it to have, where he wanted to make a difference, or he wanted to feel like he was working for a grand purpose, and that purpose doesn't seem to have materialized. And there's also a theme of doing whatever you need to do in order to accomplish your goals. And in this case, his goal was to survive and not get killed. And so, and at the end of the movie, like in the middle of the movie, his partner gets killed. It's like you can see they had a great rapport. He had a great rapport with his pilot. The pilot navigator team is essential in this type of situation, and he lost his pilot. And he wanted, in the same way that he wanted meaning for his life and the work that he did, he wanted meaning for his pilot life. He wanted his pilot had died, so he wanted that sacrifice to mean something. And in the end, he risked his life in order to give meaning to the life of his pilot. So I think those are kind of like the overall themes that are kind of running through this movie. I have a lot of favorite parts from this movie, and it's going to be kind of hard to limit it to just 5 that I wanted to talk about. So I'll be jumping around a little bit. Probably have more than 5, maybe 6 favorite scenes that I'll talk about, and then other scenes that had some impact. So one of my favorite scenes is the first scene when you have Owen Wilson and Gene Hackman together. It's similar to the scene that Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman had in their confrontation on the movie Crimson Tide. It's definitely not as intense, but there is a kind of tension that's going on between Hackman's character and Owen's character. So in the scene, Hackman kind of calls his young aviator in, and Hackman has received his resignation letter because, as I mentioned earlier, Lieutenant Chris Burnett he's kind of like disillusioned, disaffected. He doesn't feel like his life has any meaning. And so he basically wants to get out. It's like, if this is all that the Navy has to offer, then I might as well just get out and fly for a rock star or something like that. Or fly for commercial airlines. And so they basically have a discussion about his career options. And in a way, like Gene Hackman's character he's an admiral, and he's an admiral of this fleet around the Mediterranean, and he's part of this larger NATO fleet. And it's weird to see an admiral like in command of a naval vessel. Usually they're, I don't know. I don't get me asking you about how Navy command structure works. But that's the setup here. Like, you never see the actual captain of the boat. You only see the admiral. But at any rate, they're having a tense discussion about Chris Burnett's career in the Navy. And the admiral is basically trying to goad him into staying in the Navy because he's a good pilot. He's been kind of getting into having some disciplinary action against him, but nothing that was all that serious. But he really wants to keep Lieutenant Burnett in the Navy because of the potential that he has. And Burnett is kind of like set on leaving. So there was, that was a great tense moment. It sets up Lieutenant Burnett's character really good. His motivations, you get a feel for who he is and what he wants. And another great thing I like about particularly Owen Wilson's characterization is that I think everybody understands that, he's known for his comedic roles, a great comedic actor. And seeing him in this role is a little bit jarring because of where you know him from. So you're kind of curious about how he's going to play the role. And he does it very well. And he still manages to have the same charm that he usually has in his roles, in his comedic roles, in his normal comedic roles. Like, he's still cracking jokes, but they're not like, they're humorous jokes. They're not like laugh out loud, haha jokes. It's not that kind of role, right? So it's like you're getting a toned down version of Owen Wilson. And I really like that. He really plays the role well. He knows how to do a dramatic role, so he can do it if he wanted to. And I really liked him in this role. I also like a lot of the action sequences that they had. They have a fantastic, basically it's kind of an air battle. And it is later on in the movie, Lieutenant Burnett and Lieutenant Stackhouse, the pilot of the Super Hornet, they get sent on a mission, and it's basically a routine reconnaissance mission. They're just going to fly over and take pictures. And the only real criticism I have is that you're not exactly sure about the geography of the movie. Like, we know that they're in Bosnia, or the Bosnia region, but that region has changed names so many times. So and I'm not familiar with the history of the Bosnia region. I know it's like I said, it's gone through a lot of government changes. The name of the country has been split up and joined together, and so I'm not all that familiar with with that region. And the movie doesn't really do anything to teach you about it, and nor should it. Right? It's like either you know about the Bosnia region or you don't. I know that there's been a lot of conflict in that region. The U.S. has been heavily involved in shaping the governments of that region in particular. It's interesting that it's not the opposition in this particular movie. It's not an Arab nation, because in the late 90s, early 2000s, they had a lot of movies where the enemy was a shadowy Arab nation. And it's in the 80s, it was strictly the Russians. But now in this particular movie, it's dealing with more of the Bosnia region, and I don't think that they really, at least in the U.S. educational system, they don't really focus on the events in Bosnia or whatever. It's like you feel like they go straight from World War II. They go straight all the way down to the Vietnam War, and they skip that, and maybe they'll talk about the conflicts in the Middle East, particularly against Iraq. But they skip over a lot of stuff, and I think Bosnia is one of the things they kind of skip over. But at any rate, in that region is where they are. They're flying around, and Burnett, he's a navigator. He sees something on the scope that there seems to be some activity over in an area that they're not supposed to fly over. They are restricted. And his pilot, Stackhouse, he's like, we're not supposed to go over there. And Burnett kind of goads him. He's like, we're reconnaissance. Let's go do some recon. And so Stackhouse flies the plane over to the restricted airspace, and they actually see something. They see a lot of activity going on. They see a lot of military activity. There's a bunch of stuff that's real shady. And then next thing you know, they realize that they're under attack. Somebody has launched a surface-to-air missile, and that sequence where they're trying to get away from the surface-to-air missile is fantastic. I heard it. It's just the right amount of tension, the right amount of action with them trying to evade this missile. And this missile is very persistent. They're doing all the things to try to get away from this missile. They're shooting out flares. They dropping their fuel tank with the extra fuel, trying to blow it up, trying to distract the missile. They're doing all of the things. They gain sight and then lose sight of the missile because of the dynamic nature of being in an air battle where you really can't. It's like there's nobody to shoot down. You're just trying to get away from a missile. And so, and then a second missile is launched. And getting away from the first missile, they're able to evade, but the second missile is like they're having a hard time. They don't evade it, and they get taken down. And the whole sequence where they do this thing in the movie where when something absolutely catastrophic happens, they'll do a freeze frame. So just before the missile hit, there's a freeze frame. They freeze frame on Burnett where he's looking behind, and it's like he can see the missile about to hit them. And then they do a freeze frame on Stackhouse trying to figure out how to get away from the missile. And then after the freeze frame, they'll restart the action, and then the missile absolutely tears the plane apart. But it tears the plane in such a way that the pilot and the navigator are able to escape. They're able to hit their ejection seats. They get away from they're able to escape the plane. The plane is taken down and explodes. And the whole sequence was outstanding. I really enjoyed it. The person in charge of the missile launch was Sasha, and he's only credited as the tracker in the credits, but apparently his name is Sasha. And it's kind of hard. Like, that's one of the things that I guess the movie didn't do an overly good job of identifying some of the players in this movie. So I didn't realize until I was, doing research on the movie that the man's name was Sasha. The only thing I knew about him is that he wasn't in the actual military. He was brought on by the general and basically given, like, I guess, special command or special duties. And because he's given special duties, he kind of bumps up against one of the other generals, like one of the captains of the general's army. Because, like, if you're a captain of your team, you don't want some other dude having access to your men and equipment. And that's exactly what Sasha has. So there's a little bit of friction going on between him and some of the other members of the military. And Sasha is apparently some type of mercenary that the general had brought on. So Sasha was in charge of launching the missiles that took down the plane, and Sasha is later on given the job of tracking down the pilots and eliminating them, because apparently what that army is doing is it's either illegal or frowned upon. Like, they're doing stuff that they're not supposed to be doing. So they want to get rid of all of the witnesses. And apparently they have a high ranking officer inside NATO that's helping them do this shady work. And the movie doesn't do a good job of identifying this. Like, they kind of lead you to believe that it's Admiral Piquet's character that's helping them, but it doesn't feel like the movie confirms that. It's like, it's a little bit shadowy on that front. Admiral Piquet is he's a NATO admiral that's working with Admiral Riegert, the Gene Hackman's character. So they give you the sense that Admiral Piquet is higher ranking. He's in charge of the overall naval group, and he's the one giving Admiral Riegert his order, his duties, his command. So he's the one that's telling him not to fly over here, not to do this and not that. And so the question is Admiral Piquet, is he the one that's helping this wayward Bosnian army or Serbian army? I'm not sure if it's Bosnian or Serbian, but is he the one that's helping out this army carry out this illicit activities? I'm not exactly sure, but that's not what I'm focused on. That's the movie is really about the Lieutenant Burnett getting away from enemy territory. So that's mainly what I'm focused on, and the overall politics, the background motivation is not as important. At least the movie doesn't treat it as important. Like, it's one of those things where you don't really think about it until after you watch the movie. After the pilot and his navigator are shot down, the pilot is actually hurt when he escaped from the plane. He can't walk. So navigator Burnett is going to go to call for rescue. They can't call in the space that they landed, so the pilot tells them to go to higher ground to get a better signal. So Burnett starts to leave Stackhouse, basically in the middle of nowhere, to get to higher ground to try to call for a rescue. And then just as he was reaching that higher ground, the Serb volunteer guard is sweeping the area looking for the pilots who ejected. And they find Stackhouse, like, in the middle of the field. And they start basically harassing him and asking him questions and whatnot. And Burnett sees all this. He's at higher ground, and he's kind of hidden from view, and he sees all this. But because it's like an entire army, it's not like there's a whole lot that he could do. It's like he could either get away or he could surrender. And there's nothing that Stackhouse can do. Like, Stackhouse surrenders. He's thinking that he's going to be taken prisoner, but instead he's shot. And Burnett witnesses this execution, and he screams out loud, and he gives away his position. Now he has to run away. And so you had the entire army shooting, like, everybody shooting at him, and he's getting away, and he got away. But it seems like in this movie that nobody's really good at shooting, because, like, with the entire army shooting at this one dude, you would think that he would get hit, and he never got hit. So, and there's a lot of that going on in this movie, where there's a lot of bullets flying, and the people that you think would get shot don't get shot. So there's even, like, later on when Sasha is sent after, he's sent after Burnett, and he has a sniper rifle, and it comes to a point where it's like he has Burnett, like, dead to rights. It's like, there's no way that, like, Burnett doesn't realize that he's in the sniper's sight. He's, like, sitting on this the edge of this dam, and he's just kind of, like, chilling out, just drinking some water. He thought that he got away. Like, this is after he got away from the Bosnian army or the Serbian volunteer army, and he thought that he got away. And next thing you know, rock explodes next to him. And what this was is the impact of a sniper rifle that was right next to his head. And, he starts to run away again. But it's like he was sitting there for a minute. And so it was Sasha that was taking the shot at him. And Sasha missed, right? So Sasha is not very good at his job. He's not good at execution. He sucks at using his sniper rifle. Like, on one hand, why would you go for a headshot? That's totally unnecessary. Shoot him like a sniper round is powerful enough where you can shoot him in the chest and you're good, right? It's like, he's not like he's going to go and run around and get some medical attention. He's as good as dead. But instead he goes for a headshot and he misses. And this is bad. It's super bad. It's like, how are you doing this? And he missed by a mile. So he's terrible he's a terrible shot. So another one of my favorite parts in this movie, it's the part that I think about when I think about this movie. This is the part I think about all the time. And it's related to the dialogue that I did when I opened this podcast. So there is a point where Burnett is in a location where he's both safe for the moment and he's able to communicate with the aircraft carrier. So he is calling for help. And well, he called for help earlier. And then after he called for help, I think it was the admiral that told him, you have to go to this location. And when you get to that location, we'll pick you up. So Burnett, he humps it down. He gets to that location where he's supposed to get picked up. In the meantime, the admiral has a meeting with Admiral Pickett. And remember, Pickett is the admiral of the NATO group. And Admiral Pickett tells him, you can't pick him up there. That is restricted area. You have to tell him to go to the safe zone. So you can't stop right there. You have to go to another place. And the admiral doesn't like it, but he feels like his hands is tied. So when Burnett gets to this rendezvous point that he thinks is the proper rendezvous point, he gets on the horn, and then the admiral tells him, that's no good for pickup. We just got some intel. It's no good for pickup. You're going to have to go to safe zone. And the thing I like about this, like when he's having this conversation over the radio. So, and he's angry and distraught because he had witnessed his friend and pilot get executed, and he's ready to get out of this situation. He went to where he was told to go for pickup, and now the admiral is telling him that area is no good. He has to go to another place to get picked up, and he's even more distraught. So when the admiral tells him to go to safe zone and he gives the coordinates and whatnot, he's looking at his map, Bernhardt is, and then he starts to imagine where he would have to go to get to the area that the admiral is telling him to go. And then they do this like flyover. It looks kind of like it would be a drone shot. I'm not exactly sure how they shot it because this was in 2001 or 1999 when they filmed this. But you can see in his imagination all the land that he would have to cover, and that he is like the hills, the mountains, the rivers, the bogs that he would have to go through. And it's like, and so immediately in his mind, he's like, this is bullshit. This is like, I have to go through all of that area to get picked up. And then, that's when he was like, no, negative. And I think that's the part that lives with me because, I've been in the military and I've been frustrated where I did what I was supposed to do. And then next thing you know, command changes everything. And now you got to do something completely different, because you think that your job is finished. And then they say, no, your job's not finished. Now you got to do one more thing. And it's like, nah, that's upsetting. I think that's why that part resonates with me so much, is because when you think that your job is finished and you got to do one more thing, that's real upsetting. Because it's like you done programmed your entire body that this is the last thing you have to do for the day. And then you get to either go home or you go to your bunk or you get to lay down and relax. But now you can't relax anymore because the command has added one more thing that you have to do. And in this instance, Burnett had to cross over at least a few miles to get to the next place that he has to be for pickup. So I feel that frustration. I feel that weariness. And and I really like, that's probably my favorite part of the whole movie is when that happened, because I feel like I lived that experience. So there's another part that I really like where, and this is more of the sound design and the editing that I liked about this, where Burnett is trying to get away. He's in this bombed out village. There's some kids playing there, and their parents, I guess the parents had stopped for a minute. The kids are playing around. It's actually a minefield that's in this bombed out city. And the kids are playing around. And so the parents are telling the kids, okay, we got to go. And so the kids have to walk over these mines. They're tripwire mines, so they can clearly see the wires. So they're walking over these wires so they don't blow themselves up. It's just a starking imagery of kids playing around a minefield. So the kids walk over these tripwires and these mines, and they get in the car, and the family drives off. And Burnett is seeing all of this. And so he's like, well, I guess I'm going to go through this minefield in order to get away from my pursuers. So, but he's very hesitant. So he starts to walk over this mine, like his first tripwire. And then he sees two of the members of this army that's pursuing him. And so they start taking a shot at him. And this is another incident where people are shooting at him and they're totally missing. And it's like he's running in a straight line. It doesn't make any sense that they're missing, but they're missing him. So he starts to run through this minefield, jumping over these tripwires. And for whatever reason, the soldiers that are pursuing him, they don't realize that they're in a minefield. And one of them steps on the tripwire. And this is fascinating. They do the thing where it's a freeze frame, but they actually continue the motion where it's in slow motion. So you see this soldier get blowed up in slow motion. You see you don't actually see the explosion. You just see the effects of the explosion, like this powerful wind come against the soldier. And then it's pushing this soldier away. And then you see this flash of light, and this is all done in slow motion. And I thought that was fascinating that that's the way they had filmed it. Like, you see stuff in slow motion all the time in demonstration, but they rarely do it, I feel like, in the movies. So after this first explosion go off, then all of a sudden all of the explosions starts to go off in succession. So what you see is Burnett, he's running away from this series of explosions that's happening behind him. It's like the explosions are catching up to him. He has to avoid tripping over the wires that are ahead of him, and then he has to run away from the explosions that are happening behind him. And that was fun. That's a fun scene. There are some points where he's rescued by these rebels. I guess that they're fighting against the army. The army are killing a bunch of civilian, I guess, execution style. I'm not exactly sure what the impetus of the army killing these civilians. There's a point earlier in the movie where Burnett was getting away from this Serbian army, and he trips and he falls down this embankment, and the army is looking for him, but they can't find him. And what happened was Burnett had ended up in basically this killing field. It's like there are a bunch of dead bodies all around, and they've been there for a while because you see the soldiers covering up their noses. So, this is it has the odor of decay and decomposition. And so they're looking for Burnett and they can't find him. They even poke the ground with their rifles, and I think some of the rifles have bayonets on them, and they're poking the ground. They can't find him. And so they call off the search of that area, and they're going to go search elsewhere. And then you find that Burnett he hid himself under one of the bodies, and he just stayed very still. And that's how he avoided being captured. And these are all civilians. And so when he gets rescued by these civilians, and they're civilians and I guess they're rebels. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure of the geography of this war. They pick him up, and there's a point where the army catches up with them. And so like the rebels bring him to his, to their, I guess their base or their headquarters where they're kind of hiding out. But the army finds them and they start like blowing shit up. They just, shooting and blowing and civilians are trying to fight back, but they're no match for this army. And Burnett is trying to get away. And there's at one point, there's a huge explosion. I think a tank fires off a round or something like that. And there's a huge explosion. And what's fascinating is that after the explosion, there's like no sound. And all you hear is Burnett breathing. And I thought that was fascinating. I thought it was great in a way of showing the impact of being in the midst of an explosion. And there's no sound, just the breathing. The sound design was on par. I really enjoyed that. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie, the sound design, where they do a lot of playing in the editing booth, where they're playing with the visuals, they're playing with the sounds, and they're doing a lot to bring an impact of war to audiences. So I really enjoyed that. So there's one part where the mercenary, and I'm not saying this is my favorite part, but I do want to talk about it. So there's one part where the mercenary is teamed up with one of the army captains, and these two they don't really get along. They're kind of, there's a sort of animosity that the two have towards each other, and the general has teamed them up to find Burnett. So they're walking, tracking him down, and they come across a minefield, and they're trying to be careful of the mine, but apparently the captain is not careful enough, and he steps on a mine. It's one of those mines where you step on it and you lift your foot off, it'll explode. And the captain, he's looking at the mercenary and he's like, help me. And the mercenary starts to walk away because he's like, I don't like you anyway. And he starts to walk away and he's like, help me. And then the mercenary points his gun at the captain and, basically warning him that if you take your foot off the mine, I'm going to shoot you, which doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not a real threat. It's more like a psychological tool to point your gun at him, because the mercenary is pointing his gun at the captain to keep him from taking his foot off the mine. But if the mercenary shoots him, the mine will go off because, you're going to blow him off the mine. Or the guy could just take his foot off the mine and get blown up. So it's like a lose-lose scenario. So the mercenary is just, and this is Sasha, the mercenary. He's just taking out his weapon and pointing it at the captain as a psychological tool to keep the captain from taking his foot off of the mine. And then he starts to walk away from the captain. And when he's a good distance away, he hears the explosion of the mine where the captain steps off the mine, gets blown up. And that's an interesting scene. The other one is how Lieutenant Burnett tricks Sasha. So Burnett, in all of his walkings around, trying to get to the rendezvous point where he's supposed to be picked up by his team, that rendezvous point happens to be the place where the cockpit of his plane had landed. So in the cockpit of his plane, there is a hard drive that carries what the plane recorded. Why it shows why this Serb volunteer army has been chasing them all this time. The Serb army had recovered most of the plane, and they were going through the plane trying to find the recording that the plane took, trying to find the pictures, the video, trying to find the evidence so that they can destroy it. And they hadn't found it yet. They hadn't found the cockpit. Burnett has realized that he's by the cockpit. He can go to the cockpit and get the hard drive and basically give meaning to the life of his pilot. Because like his pilot was killed. He wants to make sure that his pilot isn't shot down, wasn't killed for nothing. And so he goes and he's trying to get this recording. It's not easy. And then he realizes that he's being tracked. And then you see Sasha. Sasha comes along. He sees the hard drive. Well, he doesn't see the hard drive. He sees the cockpit. And then he sees a glove like somebody's hand is on the cockpit. And then he sees, I think it's an AK-47 that's leaned up against the cockpit. So he realizes that the person that he's after is somewhere near the cockpit. The cockpit is on this frozen lake. And so he starts to walk on this ice going towards the cockpit, looking for the person that he's been pursuing for this entire movie. And he gets to the cockpit and there's nobody there. It's the thing that he thought was a man's hand inside of a glove. It was just a glove. And the AK-47 is unattended. There's nobody there. And he starts to look around, and then erupting from the surface, buried under snow, is Burnett having his Rambo moment. He comes out of hiding and he starts shooting Sasha with his issued 45. I'm pretty sure it's a 45. It's some kind of pistol. He starts shooting at Sasha, and he's hitting Sasha because, unlike the other people in this movie, he can hit his target with his weapon. And despite Sasha getting hit, he's not immediately killed. Maybe Sasha has some kind of body armor on. And then, Burnett runs towards Sasha, shooting at him, and then it ends up in hand-to-hand combat. In this fight, Burnett is nicked by Sasha because Sasha has some kind of, I think it's a rifle. He gets nicked while he's running towards Sasha, but he's not seriously hurt. So finally, he's able to kill Sasha and gets some sort of vindication for his friend, because it was Sasha that executed his pilot. And then at the same time, the Serb army starts to show up. He starts to run away. And then at the same time the Serbs show up, his rescue shows up in the combat helicopters. There's a big battle that ensues. They're trying to get Burnett to jump onto the helicopter, but he still wants to get this hard drive that he hadn't got out yet. So he runs back to the cockpit. Now he can more or less safely do it because the Serbian army is distracted by the rescue helicopters with the big battle going on. Miraculously, he doesn't get hit. He gets the hard drive, and then he hightails it back, and he's rescued. And they ride out. And during the rescue, Burnett asked for his he asked for his resignation letter back. He has now found meaning in life. Now he's found a purpose. He's able to find vindication for his friend. He's able to give meaning to his friend's life. So Stackhouse didn't die for nothing. He has the evidence that shows that the Serb army was engaged in basically some type of genocide. They were killing a bunch of civilians. They were engaged in genocide. He had the evidence for it. And he was able to find meaning in his own life. So because he found meaning in his own life, he didn't feel the need to retire from the Navy. He stays in the Navy. It's a great film for recruiters. It's a naval recruiter film. It's military propaganda at its finest. And it's fun because I really enjoyed the movie. So those were my favorite parts of Behind Enemy Lines. Have you seen this movie? And if so, what were some of your favorite parts of this movie? Drop a line, let me know. My email is backlickcinema. No, that's not my email. My email is fanmail@backlickcinema.com. And if you can think of a better name for this email address, I'd really appreciate it. So let us go on to the trivia. So this is the top 10 trivia I got from IMDb. Some very interesting things that I found. For example, director John Moore was nearly killed while operating the camera for the shot where the tank busts through the wall. He was pulled out of the way by stuntman Jimmy N. Roberts just in time. This take was used in the movie, and Moore's being pulled back is why the shot suddenly shakes. So, yeah, don't die for your art, people. I understand and I appreciate you being passionate for the things that you are doing, but be careful out there. Owen Wilson separated his shoulder during a stunt work on the movie. He was back the next day shooting action sequences. So, yeah, he's a hardcore dude. He's doing the work. He's being the action star, and he's a real confident action star. I really enjoyed this movie. What I didn't mention is that there's a lot of running in the woods. So most of his action involves running. I guess it's fair to say that he has good form. As a matter of fact, Owen Wilson joked that most of the movie was creating a bunch of ways to make running dramatic. Up next, the whole town of Hotch was a set that was built for this movie. So this is the town that it's basically kind of the headquarters for this this resistant fighters, these civilian resistant fighters, and that was actually supposed to be a rendezvous point for him, and it was basically destroyed by the army. You know, the tanks, the rockets, the explosions, very dramatic. The film was based loosely on the experience of U.S. Air Force Captain Scott O'Grady, who was shot down over Bosnia in June 1995 and was stranded in Serb-held territory for 6 days before being rescued by U.S. Marines. O'Grady brought a lawsuit against 20th Century Fox for damages to his character. He claims he didn't curse as much and never disobeyed orders. The suit was eventually settled out of court. It seems benign to complain that the character that your movie is based on is cursing too much and disobeyed orders. It's amazing that that you can win a lawsuit based on that, or that you would even complain. It may be because they probably weren't giving him any compensation, and so because they're using his life story without any compensation, maybe that was the reason for the lawsuit. The producers had complete cooperation from the U.S. Department of Defense. For one scene, they even turned around the aircraft carrier so the crew could get the right shot. So, yeah, the Army, the Navy, the military, they'll do that for you. If you make a film that makes the military look good, they will move heaven and earth to assist you in your film project. None of the actors playing Serbians were actually Serbian. The producers said they hired Croats as interns and instructors to teach the actors the Serbian language, which is virtually identical to Croatian. Because they couldn't find any Serbs willing to work on the film, they felt the project unfairly portrayed Serbs in a negative image. Vladimir Mashkov, who played the Serbian sniper Sasha, is Russian, and Oleg Krumpa, who played the Serbian general Miroslav Loka, is Polish. Some Slavics also participated in the film, such as Marko Igonda, who played Colonel Bazda, and Karmel Kalarek, who played a guerrilla who aids Burnett in Hash. The production made all of the snow out of paper. At the time of filming, it was the first winter in 104 years that it hadn't snowed in Slovakia. Now we've come to the piece of trivia that I wanted to mention earlier. I mentioned that the actor Vladimir Moskov, who played Sasha, looked extremely familiar. He had a face. I knew his face, but I had not seen a lot of movies with him in it. This is probably the only movie that I've seen with him in it, so I couldn't understand why he looked familiar. And the reason why he looks so familiar is that Vladimir Moskov was the model for Nico Bellic in Grand Theft Auto 4 from 2008. And I never even played Grand Theft Auto 4, but I'm super familiar with it. And I'm familiar with it because whenever people are talking about video games, they'll bring up Grand Theft Auto 4 and they'll bring up the cover art and he's on the cover. So, or they'll show clips from the game and you see the character running around. And so that's why he looks so familiar, because I've seen him so much with clips of the character in the game. So that's, and by the time they got to Grand Theft Auto 4, the graphics had, vastly improved over previous games. So yeah, that is why he looks so familiar. In the last bit of trivia, Owen Wilson admits that he was an unconventional choice for the lead in a movie like this, as he is better known for his comedic work. However, producer John Davis says they wanted to, quote, take the action hero and turn it on its head, end quote. I think they did a pretty good job. I thought it worked really well. I mean, although I will say that doesn't necessarily, he's not like breaking any ground, John Davis is, because there are a lot of comedians that routinely do like action movies or comedic, they'll do like a comedic action type hero. And the person that comes to mind is Eddie Murphy. That's basically what he does, right? So, especially in something like Beverly Hills Cop or 48 Hours, he's the comic relief and the star of the movie. So that's it for the trivia. And up next, we're going to see what the critics thought. The critics have it at 36%. And the audience has it at 62% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm kind of agreeing with the audience here. Actually, I would put it higher personally. And IMDb Reviews has it at 6.4 out of 10. Mike Massey from Gone with the Twins wrote, "It isn't one of the great war movies, again and again disrupted by poor editing choices, but it's still modest entertainment." Actually, I don't know which editing choices that he's referring to. The editing that I had mentioned when I was talking about my favorite parts, I think some of those choices were my favorite parts. The freeze frame, the slow motion, the absence of sound. Some of those choices were really neat, and I thoroughly enjoyed. Debbie Lynn Elias from Behind the Lens wrote, "With director John Moore's blue-gray pallor over most of the film, tinged with intermittent splashes of color, and Martin Smith's music video style editing, Behind Enemy Lines explodes into an anthem for the U.S. and our servicemen and women." Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Judith Edgerton from Courier Journal, Louisiana, Kentucky wrote, "It's just one of the many reasons why I'm reluctant to call Behind Enemy Lines entertainment. Propaganda MTV style might be closer to the truth." And I can't argue with what she wrote here. You could argue that it is a bunch of propaganda, but it's very entertaining. That's where I disagree. I found it to be extremely entertaining. The last critic we have is Brett Simon from Entertainment Today wrote, "A satisfying enough piece of giddy up entertainment that raises a few passing questions about the American, quote, cowboy mentality, end quote, before ultimately deciding it's a lot more fun to simply eat your action movie cake and try to have it too." So yeah, that's a fair assessment. Finally, Behind Enemy Lines is, as of this recording, available anywhere you rent streaming media. Now, let's lighten up the mood with an 80s classic. Once upon a time, we were bedazzled with an adventurer from the Australian outback who captivated our imagination. So join me next week so that we can talk about Crocodile Dundee. Cranky! You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.